Hello viewers, thank you very much for subscribing to GIFT TV. Today's video will be looking at how to choose the right research design, and this is going to be the part one for how to choose the right research design. So we'll be focusing on quantitative design. Then the next part will be looking at the qualitative design. Let's get into it. What is a research design? A research design is a strategy or plan or a guide or a blueprint or an approach or a framework for answering your research question by using an empirical data. Okay. The data could be in numbers or it could be in words or both. Note that a well-planned research design helps you to ensure that your method matches your research objectives and that you use the right kind of analysis for your data. Okay, so a research designer, as I said earlier, is a blueprint, is a plan, is a guide or framework or a strategy that a researcher intends to use to answer the research question using empirical data. Let's get some tips that you need to know before choosing a research design. Before you can start designing your research, you should already have a clear idea of the research question you want to investigate. Take, for example, this particular research question. How can Louisiana teachers adapt their lessons for effective remote or online learning or distance education? Okay. Here, it is important to know that there are many different ways that the researcher can go about or approach answering this particular research question. It is also important to note that your research design choice should be driven by your aims and priorities. That is by starting thinking carefully about what you want to achieve. Also, remember that there is no one-size-fits-all research design. However, your research design depends heavily on your research question and aim or purpose of the study. So the two factors, are very critical element to inform your research design. However, the first choice that you need to make is whether you want to take a qualitative or a quantitative, or you want to combine the two approach or strategy. Types of research design. We have the quantitative, that is, it deals with numbers and statistics. We have the qualitative, that deals with words and meanings, and the research design that takes into account the mixed methods, okay? That is the integration of the two. That is the quantitative and the qualitative. Let's look at the quantitative design. Quantitative design can be split into two main groups or categories or broad forms. That is, we have the descriptive and correlational, that is the first category. Then the next category, the experimental or quasi-experiment design. Remember that both the descriptive and correlational research design aim to measure variables and understand the relationship between them, while experimental and quasi-experimental designs are best for testing cause and effect, underlying that cause and effect relationships among study variables, okay? So the descriptive and correlational research design aims to measure variables and understand the relationship between them, just to understand the relationship between them. But the experimental and quasi-experimental design are best for testing cause and effect relationships. Take note of that. Under descriptive and correlational research design, the researcher measures the study variables without influencing them, because they just want to understand the relationship. This allows the researcher to observe characteristics, trends, and relationships that exist in the real world. So for the case of descriptive and that of the correlation, you will see that for descriptive, a descriptive design focuses only on systematically measuring variables and also describe characteristics of a given population under study. But for the case of correlational design, correlational design tests whether variables are related to each other, whether there is an association or relationship that exists between the study variables. For example, looking at a correlational research design, you can use a correlational research design to find out if the increase in online teaching or education in the past 35 years correlates with any change in student test score, academic performance, or letter grades. So take, for example, that is the increase in online education or teaching, okay, in the past 35 years, whether it correlates with any changes in student test score or grades or academic performance. With this design, it is hard to draw conclusion about cause and effect relationship because other factors may influence the results. So to control for, you need to go beyond correlational research design. For example, the change in test scores might not be caused by online classes or teaching alone, or the new method alone. But other variables such as increased stress and health issues among students and teachers may also be an influential factors, or maybe some of the causes as well. This brings us back to the second category, that is experimental and quasi-experimental design. An experimental research design involves manipulating an independent variable and measuring the outcome of the dependent variables while controlling for other factors, as we saw in the case for the correlational, where other factors like stress, okay, and health-related factors may influence the outcome. So in this case, we will be manipulating the independent variable only by measuring the outcome of the dependent variable while controlling for those other factors like stress and health-related factors. For example, let's say you want to test whether a new online teaching program or method improves student test score or academic performance or their letter grades. So in this case, the new online teaching program here, you want to find whether it improves student test scores or letter grades or academic performance. So in this particular scenario, the new online teaching program has become the independent variable, okay, to which that the researcher will be controlling to measure the outcome of the dependent variable while controlling for stress and health-related factors to see if the new online teaching program improves student test score or letter grade for student. So in this particular scenario, the dependent variable here that we want to observe is the changes in the student test score. That will be the dependent variable. Okay, so the researcher will be manipulating this independent variable, the new online teaching program, to see if it has any influence or it impacts or improves student test score. Now, in experimental design, you need two groups. In every experimental design, you need two groups. That is a treatment group and a control group. You need two key groups. You need a treatment group, and you need a control group. In this particular design, you randomly assign one group of students to be taught using the new online. So those that will be taught by the new online, okay, those that will be taught by the new online program, all right, will be the treatment group. And another group to be taught using a standard or traditional method of teaching, okay. Another group also will be taught by standard or traditional method of teaching, okay? And those groups will be termed as the control group. So this will be the treatment group and this will be the control group. And in this case, you compare their respective outcomes, you compare their scores, okay, in the test, so that you see if the new online program, has improved student test score as compared to the traditional or the standard method of teaching. All right, so for experimental design, you need two main groups. You need a treatment group, okay? You need a control group. With a treatment group, that is where the researcher will manipulate the independent variable, okay? Then, and compared to those same population that did not take part in the program. Okay, all right. So that is what you need to do when you want to embark on experimental design. All right. Note that experimental designs are the strongest way to test cause and effect relationship without risk of other variables influencing results. Okay, so however, the controlled conditions may not always reflect how things work in the real world. Oftentimes, the design is more difficult and expensive to implement because always you need two separate groups that you want to experiment to see if the new intervention has any effect or impact on the study outcome. All right. So for more scenarios, you can look at how a tutorial program has impact on student performance, or you can also look at how mentoring programs, So there are several programs that you can measure to see if there's a significant impact of the program on the observed dependent variable. All right. With a quasi-experimental design, if it isn't possible to randomly sort your subject into groups, like the case for the pure experimental design, then another option is the quasi-experimental. So if you cannot randomly select the groups, the treatment groups and the control groups, then the next possible option is for you to look at a quasi-experimental design. This means comparing the outcomes of pre-existing groups that differ on an independent variable. So this particular scenario is not a researcher who has maybe randomly selected groups. No, the groups has already been created. So all you need to do is to compare the outcome of the two groups. All right. Okay. So for example, if you want to take student academic performance as against COVID, so you can test before COVID and after COVID. There's already a threshold that you can look at. Okay. All right. Or maybe if there is a mentoring program that is already going on, in a particular school, and not all the students are got opportunity to partake in that program, there's likelihood that you can look at the quasar to see, because the data is there, to see those that are participating in the program, and also compared to those that didn't get opportunity to participate in the program, to see if the mentoring program is effective or not. All right, so quasi-experimental and the main experiment, you need two groups, all right, to compare the outcome. But for quasi, you don't manipulate anything. The groups are already been created, okay? So this means comparing the outcomes of pre-existing groups that differ on the independent variable. Okay, the independent variable is the treatment that you are administering, but that you are looking at to see if it has a significant impact on the dependent variable. All right, for example, that the treatment will be the mentoring program. Okay, then you compare the outcome of the mentoring program to that of those who didn't partake in the mentoring program. So, for example, if one teacher in a school has already decided to implement the new teaching method, then already you have a group. Then you can test whether the teacher's class outcome differs from comparable classes that use the standard methods. So in this case, the class outcome from new online teaching, you compare to the class outcome from the standard or the traditional teaching method. The groups have already been created, okay? So you just compare the two outcomes to see. In this case, you can use t-test to see if there's a significant difference. Okay, if you have more groups, you can compare to see if use ANOVA to test to see if there's a significant difference across the different groups. So in conclusion, remember that those that mentioned in terms for the quantitative and the quantitative design for those are the correlational and descriptive, and that of the experimental and quasi-experimental are the broad types of quantitative research design. We have specific research designs. When you take descriptive, you have different form. When you take correlation, what do you call it, experimental, you have different forms. When you take the quasi-experimental, you have different category, different forms of quasi-experimental design. So you need to read more about that. I may be doing videos on those specific forms as well. Remember that quantitative approach measures different types of variables and describe frequencies, averages, and correlations. It also tests hypotheses about relationships between variables, as we saw from the case of this descriptive and correlational category. It also tests effectiveness of a new program, okay, or treatment or product. All right. So we saw from the quasi and the experimental design as well. Thank you very much for subscribing to GIFT TV. I will see you all in the next video.